Faith is supposed to be a source of comfort, right? A place of peace. But what happens when it becomes the exact opposite? When it turns into this source of constant, relentless anxiety? When every single thought feels like a high-stakes test and every action is under a microscope for sin? Well, today, we're going to dive into that painful and really confusing world of religious OCD. I mean, listen to how one person described it. That says it all, doesn't it? This isn't just about being a conscientious believer. It's a crushing weight. This condition, which is often called scrupulosity, can make you feel like you're living in a perpetual state of spiritual emergency, where you can just never, ever feel truly right with God. And that right there, that's the central, agonizing question that people who suffer from this grapple with every single day. The terror is that if you ignore these thoughts, you're being disobedient to God. But if you follow them, you end up in a life of endless compulsion and total despair. So let's unpack this a little. To really get what's happening here, we have to look closer at these thoughts and the actions they demand. Because what's actually going on is often completely hidden, even from the person who's experiencing it. See, when you're in the grip of scrupulosity, the things you feel forced to do, like repraying something over and over, or constantly confessing, or mentally reviewing every little thing you've done, they don't feel like a disorder. They feel like virtues. It feels like you're just being extra diligent, extra humble, extra careful in your faith. But here is the crucial twist. Psychologically, these actions are serving a completely different purpose. They're what we call compulsions, behaviors that are designed to neutralize an anxious thought and give you just a fleeting moment of relief. So this isn't really about spiritual health. It's about trying to silence a faulty, overactive alarm system in your brain. And that leads us right to the core mechanism of OCD, something we can call the reassurance trap. It's the whole reason why the things that feel like the most natural solutions, like trying to find comfort or get certainty, actually end up making the problem so much worse over time. So this cycle right here, this is where the disorder gets all its power. It all kicks off with an anxious thought. Your immediate instinct is to do something to get relief. You pray a certain way, you check something, you confess, and for a second, hey, it works. The anxiety goes down. But here's the trap. Your brain learns the completely wrong lesson. It thinks, oh, that ritual I just did must have stopped a real danger. So the next time that fear pops up, it comes back even stronger, and that urge to do the compulsion is even more powerful. The loop just gets tighter and tighter. When you boil it all down, OCD isn't really a spiritual problem. It's a certainty addiction. Your brain starts to crave, absolutely needs 100% assurance that you haven't sinned, that you're totally safe, that you're perfectly okay with God. But here's the thing, absolute certainty is impossible. So you get stuck in this endless, exhausting loop of doubting and checking, desperately trying to get a fix of certainty that never, ever lasts. And this is the central mind-bending paradox of the whole disorder. Every single time you go looking for that hit of reassurance and you get it, you're actually just feeding the monster. It feels like a solution right now, but you're really just making the whole problem grow stronger in the long run. Okay, so you might be wondering, why does this feel so intensely spiritual then? Why is it so incredibly hard to see it as a psychological disorder? Well, the answer is in how OCD works. It's a hijacker, and it hijacks the things you care about the most. Think about it like this. If you valued cleanliness more than anything, your OCD might latch on to contamination and germs. But if your faith is the center of your life, OCD is going to borrow its language. It uses the concepts of God, sin, obedience, and even hell to give its demands this ultimate, terrifying authority. The content of the thoughts is religious, but the mechanism, that urgent, compulsive, doubtful process, that is pure OCD. And honestly, learning to tell these two voices apart can be a total game changer. The OCD voice, it's always urgent, panicked, all or nothing. It demands immediate action and absolute certainty. And it always leads to despair and self-hatred. It just screams and never lets go. But healthy spiritual guidance, it's calm, it's spacious. It allows you room to wait and reflect. It leads with wisdom and love, not fear. It's patient, something that can be carried gently. This next idea can be so liberating. When your mind is screaming at you about hell, it's not because you've carefully arrived at some sound theological conclusion. No. It's because your brain's overactive alarm system has found the ultimate weapon, the one threat that will absolutely guarantee you'll perform a compulsion. It's the biggest, loudest alarm bell it can possibly ring to get you to react. So the big question is, how do you break free? Well, the path to healing is deeply, deeply counterintuitive. It actually involves doing the very thing your brain is screaming at you not to do, and that's why it can feel so terrifying when you first start. Okay, so a key tool in therapy is something called mindfulness. But let's be super clear about what this is not. This is not about ignoring God. It's not about switching off your conscience or emptying your mind. And it's definitely not about denying sin. Your OCD will actually use these exact fears to try and keep you away from getting effective help.
In this context, mindfulness is way simpler. It's just the practice of observing your thoughts. So you notice a thought like, I have to confess this right now, and instead of immediately obeying it, you just label it. Ah, there's that thought about confessing again. You don't argue with it, you don't analyze it, and most importantly, you don't obey it. You just let it be there.
So why does this work? Well, every single time you do a compulsion, you're training your brain that the alarm was real. The whole goal of treatment is to break that training. By choosing not to react, you're actively retraining your brain. You're teaching it, hey, this alarm can ring all at once, but it's a false alarm. There's no real danger here, and I don't need to act. And this might be the most important reframe of all. When you do this work, it is not an act of spiritual rebellion. You are not defying God. You are courageously, bravely refusing to obey the commands of a neurobiological disorder that has hijacked the language of your faith. Ultimately, healing from this involves a massive shift in your whole approach. It's about moving away from that desperate, exhausting search for certainty and moving toward a practice of trust, even when you're in the middle of uncertainty. You see, the trap of scrupulosity is that it forces you into asking these completely unanswerable questions. You're constantly trying to prove a negative, to get perfect certainty about what's happening inside you. But what if that's the wrong game entirely? What if healing actually begins when you stop trying to answer the OCD and you start asking a much better question? This right here is the critical shift. The old question, does this thought come from God? It's a trap. You can never be 100% sure, so you're just stuck forever. The healing question is way more practical. Does this thought demand a compulsive action? This moves your focus away from the unknowable source of the thought and onto its observable function. If it feels urgent, panicky, and it's demanding some kind of ritual, you can identify it as OCD and choose not to play its game. And this is a powerful, practical rule you can use. OCD thrives on doubt. It lives in all the what-ifs. So by adopting this simple rule, when in doubt, don't act, you are directly starving the disorder of the fuel it needs to survive. I'll be honest, this is going to feel incredibly wrong and dangerous at first, but it is the very essence of getting better. At the end of the day, true faith is not meant to be a prison of anxiety. A relationship with God isn't built on compulsive rituals that are driven by panic. Healing from scrupulosity isn't about abandoning your faith. It's about reclaiming it from the grip of a disorder. And finally, discovering a faith that can be lived with freedom and peace instead of fear.